Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. As always, I am Kaylee Batesman, the content director at She Can Code. And today we are discussing how to make it as a senior female leader in tech. Now, according to DDI's 2023 Global Leadership Forecast, the percentage of women in tech leadership roles has fallen to 28%. How can we encourage more women in tech into leadership positions, and what is it like to be a leader in tech? To help me answer these questions and more, I have the amazing Liat Barer, the VP of Product at Odeeo, with me today. Welcome, Liat.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come and have a chat with us today. We want to set the scene a little bit with some info about your background, please, how you got into tech.
Of course. So I've actually gotten into tech by mistake, by chance. I was actually studying psychology and business. I was still a student and trying to sort of find myself and understand like where I want to go. So my first student job was actually by accident in an ed tech company, which I really loved. And I literally fell in love in the industry, in the how fast-paced it is, how interesting it is, how much I can learn from being a part of a tech company. And I immediately sort of knew that this is what I wanted to do and this is what I wanted to pursue. So that was actually my first job, and I ended up staying there for 7 years, doing multiple positions, becoming a manager for the first time, and the rest was history. So I kind of put my psychology studies behind, even though it always is helpful with anything that you do, especially in leadership roles, when you have to manage people, that's always a plus. But yeah, that was my journey into tech. I've actually started from the business side. I was doing customer success and a little bit of sales. I led some groups at multiple companies that I was on. And then during my time at the company, I've decided that actually my real passion is the product. I've had a chance to be a part of a few projects where I was lucky enough to sort of lead and push the product side. And that's where I understood that this is really my passion, and I love being involved in the tech itself. And especially this great connection between the business and the tech. And the rest is history. I started my first product position at a great company called Startup. I moved there to Yahoo. I worked at Yahoo for a few years, and now I'm here leading the product at Odeeo.
Amazing. And when you moved in, or when you fell in, which I hit often, I fell into tech, and one of those, and I stayed. But what did you think before you fell in? Did you think it was techie? Did you think you had to be very techie to go into the tech industry? Whereas actually you probably were quite surprised when you especially moved over to product that don't have to be technical.
That's an amazing question. That's actually a question that I really love, because when I actually moved for the first time to a product manager position, I took the most techie role, right? I was the product manager of a server team, like very, very hardcore, maybe the most tech-oriented team in the company. And I have no computer science background. I've never studied. I've never done a degree in computer science. I may have studied that in high school, but that's more of, just a general background. That's just something that was interesting for me, or maybe helped me to learn how to think techie. But I'm not coming from computer science. And sometimes when you imagine going into those tech roles, you think that you have to be super and very, very techie. You have to know all the details. And sometimes you do. Some roles are very, very technical. But I'm a big believer in learning as we go. I always said that at my first year in a real company, right? Like in a real job, I've literally learned more than I did in my 12 years of study, and definitely more than my 3 years of degree, like the university degree. Because real life training is the best training, and you learn so much from it, and you can get techie. If you have the passion for technology and this is something that you want to learn, then you can do it. And you can also be very successful at what you do, and to lead very, very technical teams, and, to also get them to learn a little more on the business side. So.
Yes, I agree. Because I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the key to success in the tech industry? But actually, you just mentioned something so important here. It's just constant learning and being able to keep up with the pace. And I think it's not one of those jobs, is it, where you just kind of, you graduate, you go into your job and you don't learn anything new, or, you know, you might do some in-house training in another job and that's it. But the tech industry, you really have to constantly keep learning to keep up with, you know, everything that is happening. And a lot of jobs now that exist didn't, you know, even exist when a lot of us graduated. So you know, it's I suppose that's one of the keys to success, isn't it, in the industry?
Completely agree. Completely agree. I think that if you ask me, like, the number one thing will be to be very, very curious, right? Like, you have to have the passion to learn all the time and to change your day to day. Like, I always say that what I love about what I do is that if I look back a year ago, things were so different and I had to learn so much and I had to change so much of what I do. And I think that in that aspect, we're very, very lucky. We live in a fast-pacing world, right? So it's hard for me to think of a situation where I work 30 years doing the same thing, right? Like, over and over again, nothing much changes. Like, you may be an expert in what you do, but for me, that's just not fast-paced enough. And one of the things that I love most about the tech industry is how curious you have to be, how much you have to learn, how much you have to look for new information and to try and, you know, be out there and understand, like, what's new in the world and how can you bring this into your company. And I believe that's the key to succeed in this type of industry.
Yes, yes, definitely. And it really does take a certain personality type to want to continually
For
learn,
sure.
doesn't it? I mean, it's not for everybody, that's fair enough. But as you said, it's a very fast-paced and exciting place to be. No day is the same. Do you find that in your role, that, you know, each day is actually very, very different for you?
So different, so different. Every day I do something completely different. My day is composed by so many aspects. I think that that's one of the reasons that I fell in love in product management in general, because product management is such a central role that you have to be sort of like all over the place. So there are some days where I'm only talking to my R&D team and the conversations are very techy and I'm trying to learn, and I look into integration guides and docs and even go through code and just try to understand things that are going on. And then at another day, I can be in a conference, you know, selling the product and talking, you know, with the business teams and understanding everything from clients. So I love the fact that this position is so versatile, right? You can do anything, and you can actually touch everything and make it work for the company by bringing solutions that work for both sides. So
yeah, especially in products, it's always the ladies that I talk to on here always say about working in product that you think, again, they have that thought that you had to be technical, but actually you just have to really know that product inside out. And as you said, you could find yourself at a show suddenly selling, you know, so you can't be that person that thinks I'm just going to be sitting writing lines of code, not talking to anybody. That is not working in product. And you found yourself, you know, selling, having a go, touching upon everything.
exactly. And I'm also a big believer specifically that, you know, there are some product roles that are maybe very technical, that are more behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I'm a personal big believer in the fact that if you don't go there, if you don't go out there and you talk to clients and you hear everything firsthand, you hear the problems from the people that have the problems, you can't really solve the problems. So I'm a firm believer in the fact that product people need to be on the field, talking to everyone, going to conferences, selling the product ourselves. If we don't, we will probably never really understand how difficult it is and what are the challenges that we need to solve.
Yeah, and completely lose contact with the people that you're making it for.
Exactly.
So today we're talking a little bit about women in leadership. And I wanted to start off asking you, though, how do you think the industry, how has it changed for women since you started in tech?
So, wow, a lot. I feel old now, but yes, a lot. I would say that probably the first thing is the number of female role models that you can that are out there, right? Like it really grew. And I really feel, for me personally, that it is very inspiring, and that's a great momentum that there is for women in the industry. So that will probably be the first thing that I think has changed. The second thing is the community. I think that one of the things that I love most, really, and I feel it really recently in the past few years, that the community of women lifting women, and women sort of wanting to help other women in the tech industry, specifically in the ed tech industry where I'm coming from, this is a very big thing. Like, I'm a member of different groups of women in leadership roles that are sort of like pushing each other, making introductions, inviting each other to different events, to different, conferences, podcasts, things that you can learn from, that I really appreciate. And I think that this is one of the things that really empower us as a community, like a minority that is not really a minority, right? But still, like, making us sort of work for each other and help each other. And I really see that lately in the industry, which I love.
Yes, I love that. I absolutely agree. The more ladies that come into tech, the more that are thinking, helping, pulling each other up the ladder and helping each other up. Just remembering to look back behind them, obviously helps everybody. I agree with. Now there are far more women, even on the ground, when you go to shows and conferences. And I remember when I started in tech, going to big tech conferences, and especially in the UK, and a lot of people, I mean, a few times I got asked if I were lost. I kind of looked so out of place, sitting, in a room full of 100 men, and then if things started to change. And funny enough, when I used to go to shows in the States, that was very different. And I found that there were lots of women kind of milling around tech shows in the States. But I found in the UK for a really long time that when you were out on the show floor, you looked very lost. And, I was asked, I've said this on the podcast before, to go and get somebody a drink because they thought I was the waitress. And, it was that kind of,
yeah.
kind
a
of
moment
feeling
that you just treasure. Yes.
Yes, stay with me, yes. But yeah, have you had that feeling at events before? And then I think things are a lot better now when I go, and I think there's women everywhere. There's a queue for the toilet suddenly at a conference, a tech conference.
I definitely feel that. I think that what I really feel the change, right? Like it's not uncommon now to go in a tech conference and have a decent percentage of women in the room, which is incredible. I still think that we're a part of the change.
Yeah.
It's not over, right? Like we're still not in a place where we can say, okay, I'm going to a conference and it's a equal division between men and women and everything looks fine. Like, it's still not the case. You still feel like the outsider a little bit. At least I feel that when I go into a room, and it is what it is. Most of the people, especially when you go to, meetings with senior leadership, it's usually going to be men in the room. Sometimes I'll be the only women, and that's very challenging. I was just participating in a panel that was talking about female leadership, actually, and I was telling the story about the fact that when I was in high school, I went to I studied computer science. It was like kind of my major. And our class was 40 people, like 40 students. And out of 40 students, we were just 4 women, like 4 girls, actually, because we were very young. But we were 4 girls, right? And that's very intimidating. I feel for myself, like for the girl that I was going to a class with 36 boys and just 4 girls. And that's always an intimidating feeling, and something that we need to sort of like overcome to make sure that we feel that we're in our place. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that as time goes by and this, there's more equality and this gap is being narrowed, that will make things more natural for everyone. And it will also be a great example for more and more girls to be a part of the industry, because when you're a minority in the room, it's very hard for you to actually to be there, to be present. You always feel like you're the outsider. But when you see that everyone's like you, and things are just more equal in terms of the male female division, then you feel natural. You can just feel that you can be yourself. You don't have to think about that. You can think only about work and what you do best. So
yes, I love that. And what you just said there on just being able to be yourself at work, which is so important, obviously, being authentic. Because I was going to ask you, why do you think there are still so few females in the tech sector? But as you just mentioned there, it's probably a bit of both, isn't it? It starts at education. If you find yourself as only 4 girls in a class of 40, it starts there. But then there are also challenges once you get into tech as well, isn't there? And retaining women. So why do you think there are still so few females in the tech industry?
yeah, specifically in leadership roles, I think that the main, like, I can divide it maybe to 2. First, I think there's just not enough role models, right? Like, most of the people that you see in senior leadership are men. And again, this is something I'm a firm believer in, role modeling just based on being there and just being present, and not necessarily by, talking, or that's also important. But I think that the more we women see more women in leadership positions, it will become more natural. And I really believe that, if we do this podcast in 10 years, the numbers will be different. And that makes me very happy, because I do think that young, girls or young women see now a lot more role models that they can look up to, and they can feel this is something that I can do. So that would probably be the first. I think that specifically for senior leadership, there are also still a lot of differences between men and women in terms of, how they divide between themselves the work and personal life kind of balance. I think that until we solve the inherent belief that women are the, let's say, primary responsible parents, right? And they are the natural person to sort of turn to when it comes to kids. I was literally today talking to someone here, and I was saying that my son's kindergarten teacher is always calling me. She's always calling me. She's never calling my husband. And that's fine. I can juggle. I can do everything. I can work, and I can be in senior leadership and also have a child and also be a great mom, and that's fine. But I do understand the challenge, right? Like, when everything is on your shoulders as women, it's very, very hard to actually invest the time and to and to be in senior leadership. Like, you become afraid, like, I can't do everything. So you have to have a great support system. You have to have a great partner. You have to live a very equal life that really supports and respects the men and also the women. And just allow you to take the opportunities that you can take. And I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And I hope that this is something that will also, that will be the natural thing. That will be what happens for everyone soon enough. So that will help people reach more leadership roles.
Definitely, because the number of women in leadership roles is obviously falling, and I was going to ask you a little bit about why you think that is, and you just covered it perfectly there. I mean, the 2 main things, role models is one. It's somebody to just even envision moving into that role. If there's nobody there that you can really relate to, that's obviously going to cause some problems. And then obviously what you said about being the main caring for children, for instance, or whoever you may be caring for. And you're absolutely right. We've come a long way. I know a lot of senior ladies in tech who say they reverse the roles with husbands whilst they were in senior leadership, and there are lots of people that are lucky enough to give that a go. But we've still got a really long way to go, unfortunately. And as you said, sometimes everything can be on the woman's shoulders. Yeah, we are getting there. I think as well, though, that comes from the top down, doesn't it? If you don't see for instance, if you do have all male leadership, you want to see them leaving to go and collect the children, them taking a call from the nursery, and then it trickles down to the company and the culture and everything about
Exactly,
it.
exactly. And you want to see women in senior leadership that can, you know, have babies, they can get pregnant, they can go on maternity leave, they can go back, they can still be what they were, they can still be the professionals that they are, even though biologically we're the ones that are, you know, giving birth. That's totally fine. That's also a gift. But you know, this is something that I feel that a lot of times is holding us back, just because it's, you know, it's time consuming. And this is something that sometimes when you don't see examples of women doing that, you know, going on maternity leave, going back to their senior positions, then you don't believe sometimes that you can do it as well. So you maybe don't even aspire to be at that position. So I'm a big believer in role models. It doesn't need to be like a formal mentor, but sometimes just seeing someone in that position can just make you feel like, you know, I can do this myself.
Yes, because I mean, what do you think should be done to increase the number of women in leadership roles? And what you just said there, just seeing somebody, a woman in a leadership role, go off onto maternity leave and come back and find everything was fine. You know, nothing bad happened. And I've spoken to ladies who went on maternity leave, come back and received a promotion and had no idea that was going to happen. But they were at a great company, they felt more loyal to stay at that company. I mean, there are more things that companies can be doing, aren't there, to encourage, to increase the number of women into leadership roles?
Definitely. I think that besides the fact that there is a great role model maybe in the company itself to show other women that they can, it is also very important to talk about it, right? Like to open things. I think my best example is that sometimes when you sit in a table of, you know, the leadership, like the leadership of the company, it will usually be mostly men, right? And I see that myself. Like I'm a single, like I'm the only woman in a table of men currently in the leadership of the company. Hopefully that will maybe change at some point, but currently this is the case. And I think that for me, it's very important to also advocate for things that are important for us and that are maybe making women feel uncomfortable. Maybe these are things that the men in the leadership position need to pay attention to, and they won't think about them themselves. I can really see it, and I'm really in that aspect. I work at such a great company with such great leaders, like men leaders that really care about this topic. And sometimes I really see their eyes open, like literally I see their eyes open when I bring to the table things that are related to how you address women, like how you talk to them, or things that you say that might sound, I don't want to say not appropriate, but like sometimes they make you feel smaller, or things that you should pay attention because they can be sensitive, or things that have to do with maternity leave and how to treat that in the company. These are things that I believe that the women voice in the company is critical, right? Like it's so important to have someone sort of like representing women. And even if I'm a minority within the leadership of the company, I still feel that I have a voice, and I can bring the voice of other women as well. And that's great. And I think that this is something that other companies can do to sort of open this conversation, and to make sure that they let the women be heard in that aspect.
Yes, and that you're there at the top as a role model for other people to see you, you know, using your voice and sharing your knowledge, obviously in a room occasionally full of lots of other men. But women, they're not the only underrepresented group in tech. What can be done to make tech more diverse across race, class, and gender? Obviously, we've spoken about gender a bit, but there are other things that need to be improved as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that just like I said about gender, that approach takes for any other underrepresented group, right? Or we can call it a minority. Like this, as long as we are aware of that, as long as this is something that the company sets as a goal, right? To make sure that the company is diverse, that it has representation, that we are going towards hiring people from, all the types of groups that we have in society, that will just make us a better company, right? Like, because we're selling products that want to reach people. And if you want to reach people, you want to reach everyone. And what better way to learn what is the best way to approach everyone than to have everyone right around you? You don't want to be a company that is very, I don't know, not diverse, like a company that doesn't have all these voices around. And I feel that
those embarrassing PR moments as well, where it's kind of something went out and somebody said, how did nobody spot that? Was because our team wasn't diverse enough to pick it up. That's why.
That's also true. Like we definitely need to take that under consideration. This is something that needs to be spoken in management meeting with senior leadership, to sort of not ignore it. I feel that once this is spoken, this is something that is really out there. And I really feel that as like an advocate for women in my company, I feel that once this is spoken, this is out there, we are, actually making moves towards it, that alone, and that awareness just, makes it happen, makes the company just be more like leaning in towards the right hiring. So.
Yes, definitely. Do you think it's a bias problem? And if so, how can we challenge these biases?
I definitely think that it is also a bias problem. We can't run away from it. Bias is something that was always there and is probably here to stay, at least for the short term. And I think that in general, we always need to challenge those biases, right? I feel that like sometimes it's actually very annoying, right? Like you have to always prove that you're not that biased, right? Like that you're not that you're not that. And that takes a lot of energy, right? Like from women, I feel that sometimes you have to work in not falling into the bias. So that's something that is very challenging. And I think that it's also a matter of awareness. This is something that like the more women we have, the more conversations we also have about this, bringing bias into awareness is something that can really help us as a society in general, but also like as a company to try to avoid it and to try not to behave based on that bias. So yeah, it was always there. It's probably here to stay, but let's make sure we minimize it.
Yes. Do you think though AI plays a role in eradicating these biases?
That's a great point. Yeah,
who's designing
right.
it?
Right. Exactly. That's a great point. And I've recently read an article about this. I think it was like Harvard Review, or I can't remember where I read the article, but it's a very interesting point. The fact that like AI, it's made by humans, right? So eventually it learns what we are and it embodies that. So if there are biases in the society, there will be biases in AI. And I think that this is also something that we need to be very aware of, like as maybe like teams that are creating AI models, that are using it in different companies in various ways that you can use AI today, to sort of make sure that you take this under consideration, that you avoid using biased categories, biased wordings in your AI models, to make sure that this is something that you're not making the problem even worse by maybe mistakenly relying on an AI tool that has bias just embedded. So that's also a matter of awareness. I can't say that I'm an expert in AI, but I do think that this is a tool that can potentially change the world. So we need to make sure that this world is changed for the better.
Yes, exactly. I love that, for the better. Yes, not the worst, obviously. That it's going to be a good tool to eradicate those biases. In terms of male leaders, what can male leaders do to become better allies, do you think?
Listen, they should definitely just listen.
Yeah.
They work with a lot of women. They have women colleagues. They have everyone around them. I think that they should be very open to listening and to understanding the problems, to try and to be open to the fact that I can give you an example. When I talk about the fact that sometimes it's very hard for me to walk into a room that has, all men, and I'm the only leader that is female, I can really see, and I've had this conversation with my fellow men leaders. They were very surprised that I said that, because they were like, "Well, you're so confident, and it doesn't seem like it's bothering you," which is maybe true on the outside. Like, I don't let it show. I don't let it affect me. I'm yes, I'm a very confident person. I have a lot of experience, so I kind of learned how to sort of hide that. But it's still there. Like, it is still a thing, and this is still something that is in the back of my head, that I sometimes think about. So I think that only, like, even by the fact that I tell them this fact, right? Like, and that I can open their eyes to the fact that sometimes it's very challenging to be the only female in the room. That on its own is very helpful. And I think that the more men are more open to listen to those challenges and don't sort of like take for granted that, women can do everything. Come on, like, you can be leaders, you can be managers, you can be whatever you want. Sometimes it's very hard, and sometimes there are challenges that you need to be a part of. Like, you need to be a part of the force that pushes us, forward, and not just assuming that everything is very, very easy. So,
and that it's just a conversation that ladies have, and that's it. And you're right, listening and getting involved. I had a lady who I was speaking to recently, and we're talking about male allies, and I said something like, "Oh yes, so and so is a male ally because he has a daughter," and I said, her eyes rolled, and she said, "Of course," and she said it like the only male allies that she had experienced were those that had young daughters and they wanted to do something. And I thought, that's a good thing, though, that men are listening and men are on board. But she kind of saw it as it's still a conversation that only ladies have. And unless, a man has had a daughter and then suddenly gets involved in the conversation, it should just be, part of the culture of the company, and that, that it's okay to voice certain things, and that men are part of that conversation as well, which I think we are getting better at that. As you said, your own company, you felt comfortable to voice certain things, and things are getting better. We still have a way to go.
Definitely, for sure. But I completely agree with you. Yeah.
What advice would you pass on to other women to help them progress in the tech industry? Is there anything you wish someone had told you?
Interesting question. I think maybe my best advice will be to speak up, will be to actually make your voice heard about everything. I think that sometimes we fall into our own bias of, if we think something is wrong, or if we think something, not even like not wrong, I mean, in like, there's a bias here, right? Like, even professionally, like, if you think something can work differently, if you think that, something better, sometimes I feel that women, and that's not only me feeling, right? Like, that's, I think, scientifically proven, that sometimes women are afraid to be very assertive, because they're afraid to be, bitchy. They're afraid to sort of come out as like the bad person. So they kind of trying to be very nice to everyone. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be nice. You should always be nice. That resonates, and that's a great thing to be. But still, you have to speak up. You don't have to be like, I would advise not to be afraid to say what you have to say, and to be confident, and to speak up, to really, be professional. Don't be afraid how it sounds, and, to who it sounds. If you know something, exactly.
You just mentioning it makes me feel uncomfortable, and that they had no idea. It's kind of sometimes people aren't mind readers. Perhaps if I don't voice, even that point, how are they going to know?
Exactly, exactly. And also like in professional things, right? Like don't be afraid if you know something, if you are the person to go to. If you're the professional leader in everything that has to do on this subject and you have your opinion, speak up, make it heard. And this is something that I think that it's a lesson that I've learned over the years, to make sure that my voice is always heard, that I never keep quiet, even if I think that maybe, at the back of my head, I think that it may, not be the nicest thing. Sometimes it's more important to be professional than to always be nice. So this is a kind of a bias or something that I'm trying myself not to fall into. So that will be my best advice.
Yeah, I love that. You've mentioned role models a little bit throughout this as well. Do you have any role models yourself that you particularly admire, either professional or at home?
So many. I was very lucky to also be raised by, a mom that was, always a career woman. She was a great mom, but she was also a great career woman. So she had a great career, and I've learned a lot by watching her and seeing her lead and be what she is. I've also had a great fortune to be to have role models that were in my work environment, to have leaders that are females. At my first company that I worked for, there was a female CRO, which I completely looked up to. And she was the one that I wanted to be, when I first started my career. And that's really a great example. And as I said, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like an official mentor that you have. Sometimes it's even by just watching them and knowing that you can do this. That's by its own, like, it's enough. So definitely a lot of role models in my life.
Did that help you as well, find your leadership style? Because some ladies that I've spoken to on here, they say if you've only got male role models, you tend to think that leadership style was correct, and you might come across as slightly masculine in your leadership style, when actually it's your advantage to be yourself and be feminine, and if you are feminine, and to bring that into your leadership style and to find your authentic self, instead of
I definitely I completely agree with that point. Like, when you're a young manager, you always try to like shape your own management style and leadership style, and that's true. If you only see male role models, then you tend to think that that's the way to manage, but that's not necessarily true. I think that one of the biggest advantages that women bring into management and into leadership is the EQ, right? Like, everything that has to do with bringing the emotions and understanding people. Not that I said that men don't, but I think that sometimes as women we tend to do that more, and I think that I definitely feel more comfortable in my leadership style and in the fact that I'm a people's person and that my team is always very, very important to me. That has a lot to do with the fact that I've seen great women in leadership positions, and they were leading in the same way. But they were also, the most amazing professional people that I could look up to and say, I can be this and that. I don't have to be just one or the other. So
yes, I love that. You don't have to pick and choose. We're almost out of time, but I have one final question. Do you have any final career tips or advice for our listeners?
Wow. Don't be afraid to make changes. Don't be afraid to follow what you love. I remember myself making the very hard decision to move from the business area to the product area, even though I had no technical background, and even though I was already in leadership positions in the sales and customer success part, teams. And to start again in product was, it was basically to say, I want to do it all over again. I want to sort of like rebuild my career. And I'm very, very grateful and happy that I've done that, because that was my real passion. And I was able to reach, other leadership roles in that position, and to really take product to be my career. So I would say that is my best tip. Don't be afraid to follow your heart and to make changes and to follow what you love.
Amazing. That is lovely positive advice to end on today, because we are already out of time. I could keep chatting to you for another 4 hours probably on this topic, but we are already out of time. Liat, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure chatting with you.
It was a pleasure for me as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And to everybody listening, as always, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.